Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, guys. It is Speaking Line, and welcome back finally to DLC Required, the podcast where gamers talk about gaming and whatever gamers talk about. It's been a little bit of time. Had some internet issues, shout out AT&T for being AT&T, but we're back, baby. South by Southwest, PAX East. It was my first PAX East, actually. It was a lot of fun. I may prefer West. I know that may be a taboo thing to say, but I think I may prefer PAX West. East was fantastic, though. It really, really was. I'm so excited to bring you this week's episode. We have the in-house composer for Gearbox, Josh Carro, joining us to talk about making video game music and Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, which, if you have not spent time listening to the Wonderland soundtrack, if you're a game soundtrack person at all, recommend it. Even if you're not, I think you'll really enjoy it. I learned a lot about music talking to him. I played French horn for 10 years. I was in band for years, but the music theory behind making game music and making it not linear, but still feel like you're really in control. Just, oh my gosh, genuinely such a cool conversation. A lot of cool indie game debates. It was a great time. Big shout out for him to coming on. I actually have the Wonderland soundtrack on vinyl. I really love video game vinyls. Anyway, I don't know. I just love putting them on when I'm like cleaning or decorating or thinking. Honestly, they're fantastic. Highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. So here's Josh. I'll let him take it away. Enjoy. Okay, I would love to know what got you specifically into composing video games and composing in general. Like, what was that intersection? Did you grow up a gamer, or what really brought you into this world?
It's kind of an interesting story because I never was trying to be a video game composer, but I had been doing composing for a long time. I started studying music very seriously when I was very young, about 9 years old.
Oh, wow.
And it was a serious practice. It wasn't just like messing around. Like, I was really serious about it. And I asked my parents if I could get lessons, and I was like getting lessons and practicing like 6 hours a day all the time. And I just fell in love with music. And especially, I was a drummer, percussionist. The nature of that instrument really is a lot of playing by ear and learning how to do improvisation. Traditionally, it's not really, especially the drum set, is not a notational background instrument. It's generally not that. So I did a lot of work, training my ear and practicing and learning how to improv and think of form in my head because I wasn't able to really write anything down. That was the beginning, but, I went through school, high school. I was in all the bands. I was in marching band. I was in jazz band. I did an undergrad in percussion performance at ASU, and then I did a master's at Cal Arts in performance. I study North Indian classical music as like, I wouldn't say a hobby, but it's kind of like, it's like the musicology part of what I study other than just composing. I think it's important to really try to learn like music of different cultures, because you see so many similarities and things that aren't similar. And like, you learn so much. And it's just beautiful to see how other cultures, express through music. And so through that whole thing, I had been writing a lot of music and just writing music for anything I wanted, really. And eventually people started playing my pieces because I was kind of bugging people saying, hey, will you play this piece or will you play this piece? And, if you do that enough, you build a group of, contacts and professional relationships. And I know that all sounds really fast and really easy, but that's kind of like where it kind of blossomed into what it is. And that being said, my style of my own work is extremely experimental and it's very modular. So it's not linear. It's not like, here's a piece of music, read it from left to right.
Yeah.
My scores are kind of like cells where you say, oh, I think I'm going to start here. And then, oh, maybe I'll go here next. Or, oh, maybe I'll start here and I'll go here. That's kind of a simple example of one of my pieces. But you can understand probably from hearing that how that relates to video game music, because video game music is not linear, right? I mean,
triggered by environment or encounter. Yeah, absolutely.
All kinds of things, right? There's It could be the simplest thing from the player dies and a piece of music plays, or there's multiple levels of intensity while you're in combat and the music has to change at any given time, and hopefully those sections work together, and so it just kind of was like meant to be in a way.
Yeah, your style kind of fit naturally into that, because I haven't thought about video game music in that regard where, there are individual pieces I love and listen to and really adore those themes coming back, but you do need it to be able to, like, the intensity changes and have it not just feel like the sound cuts off and there's a new song going, and having that ebb and flow of it. That's really interesting. I that never occurred to me, honestly, somehow.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's cool is that it is linear in a sense, because when you're playing a video game, you're hearing a linear.
Yeah, you're hearing the linear track, the journey of that song.
Yeah, but it's individual, or it's special. It's different every time, right? So knowing how to write music that can do that is kind of where the art of modular composition, or for video games or multimedia, is at.
Yeah, no, it's really interesting, because I feel like that's so much of the disconnect. And it's genuinely fascinating to me, because I explain that a lot with, like, the writing or the little things we're allowed to do in games, where a lot of people don't realize, how barks are triggered, or if someone character puts on a jacket, what that really changes, and the way you can break it down that way of all of these elements need to fit together for you to still have the autonomy you have in video games. I don't know why that never occurred to me, that music is such an inherent part of that, where you do need it to be that that current needs to be able to go wherever the player goes at that point. Because I can't think of a lot of game soundtracks that I love where I notice the music shift, unless it's like, there was a meme on TikTok recently where it's like, what video game sound gives you anxiety? And it's always the Sonic drowning noise or the Kingdom Hearts, like, low health modifier and things like that, which are true as hell. Those stick with me.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. I didn't sing it. I remember it. That's funny. For me, you know what piece that is?
What is it?
It's from Metal Gear Solid when you're discovered. Yeah. It's like,
dude, any Discovery music, I always like, someone put like the Sims burglar sound. I'm like, yeah, absolutely. When your lot locks and there's just the little like shrill, but any of the Discovery notes in games usually send just a chill down my spine of, oh, I fucked up.
And even some of them become iconic. Like even the sound of the what do you call it? Not the phone, but the codec in
yes.
Like that is like a iconic sound now. Like almost everybody here has heard that or knows what it is. You know what I mean?
That's how I am with the BioShock. Like, here's your new objective, and BioShock 1 specifically. That chime, absolutely ingrained into my soul. Yeah, another totally. fantastic atmosphere. That I think that's always interesting for me. Do you have a preference between like the atmospheric kind of music or character themes or combat? Like, does it all feel the same to you, and like how you approach it and how you're inspired to write it? Or do you have, like, I love dialogue writing, for example. Like it is my thing, but I get really into the groove of, certain ways I write action, but I know which are my strengths at that point. Does music feel differently like that in games? Like, do characters get you excited, or any specific flow that you find really works for you?
You know what really gets me excited is the original concept art for the games.
Yes, dude, art books are my favorite. I have so many over here. The Wonderlands art book, honestly, fantastic.
That's where it starts. I mean, that's where it starts. Like before there's any sort of test map, before there's any sort of sound design or anything. I mean, and I think this is beautiful. There's still an artist, I mean, like if you saw, like as you look at the concept art for Wonderlands, you look at it and you're like, oh my God, this, like, it doesn't really look like Wonderlands. It looks like this, incredible fantasy world. And you're like, wow, this is like the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, And I think that kind of all concept artwork is like that. I mean, the Metal Gear stuff is like absolutely, insanely, beautiful. All of it is beautiful, and the games don't obviously end up looking like that because like there are technical, things that need to be figured out and need to happen, right? So that's the kind of thing that gets me excited. So that's where I start. So depending on how much they have for the game that I'm going to be writing music for,
yeah,
it's not a lot.
I was going to say, how early into the process do you normally come in, especially with like big budget stuff like the stuff you'd be doing at Gearbox versus like the indie stuff? Because I feel like indie would be further down the line than probably something like AAA would need that much time to prep and have that really ingrained into it.
Yeah, it really all depends. Generally and traditionally, which is kind of older, which I think is good for this reason, is that music would kind of come in later, almost at the very end when everything is done, and they're like, "Okay, now can you write some music for this?" And they're like, "Okay," and they have 3 to 6 months, whatever it may be, maybe a year, maybe longer. But me being an in-house composer at Gearbox, I'm able to start like at the beginning with everyone and kind of grow with everyone. So like that is like the true, in my opinion, that is kind of the true, deepest way to do it, because you're really collaborating with those other artists instead of being, which I don't think is bad, being an outsourcer where you're kind of like, I only have a limited amount of time.
Yeah.
The company needs to do, or the development company needs to do their homework before they say write music for this, right? So they
absolutely, yeah.
They have insane amount of work. They basically have to give you a demo and say, okay, here's the Wonderlands demo. Now, can you write music for, when I'm starting a Gearbox, I don't have all that. I start from the beginning. So it's a much longer process. I make a lot more iteration. There's a finer, like fine-tuning process. And ultimately, I think that you come out with, I don't want to say better or worse, because I'm not really too much into giving polarized opinions, but I think that you get a deeper vision of the art when you go that way.
It feels like it would have that, like the through line of thought would be there. It would be so ingrained into the story and how people are playing the game. If you've started that early into the process, that it would be really, again, not necessarily better or worse, but definitely more natural part of the story.
Yeah. And it's, it ends up being more closely tied to the art. And I say art as a general word for the game, rather as like, oh, we're making I don't know, Spider-Man 2. Can you make, cinematic combat music for orchestra? Like, okay, yeah, that's like pretty standard and broad, right?
Yeah.
But, with Wonderlands, it was like, well, what do we want to do? So I was, really thinking about what are the landscapes going to look like? What's the time period? Sort of like, even though, it's, who knows?
Well, you're bringing also like D&D and fantasy and, all these elements that you really do get to shape that. It doesn't feel like a period piece at that point, because it does, but it's still Borderlands.
Yeah, for sure. And so I tried to do it in that way. And, it's, I would say it's actually a much more grueling process, because there's a lot of disappointments in there because things don't work, and you grow with something that you really fall in love with. And then like it has to go because, the course changes or things change, or that map just isn't in the game anymore.
That's always, crushing, absolutely crushing, I imagine.
So there's that with it too. But, there's pros and cons to both, because being an outsourcer, you don't really have to deal with that. You're just like, all right, well, you hired me for 6 months of work. Here's 6 months of work, and see you later. I have 3 more, scores to write, type of thing.
I think it makes sense for me that from the total outside, obviously, but that would be how that relationship with Borderlands games and Gearbox in general would go, because I really love that the writer's room aspect is alive in that with Gearbox, where it does truly, from the people I've been able to talk to or, things I've read at that point, it feels much like the old school. I say old school now because WGA is fighting for it to come back, but that old school collaborative writer's room experience where it's not just your solo having to grind this out and then get the notes back and do all that. Like it does feel truly collaborative when I talk to people across the board about it. And I love that music is part of that process, because it is I feel like some of my favorite music in games, because it's not the stuff that steals the show really in the earlier games that I really love. It's the stuff that it just makes that atmosphere. It's like, why do I love this map so much? It's a very stuff that just is marinated into the world. And I love that about Wonderland specifically. The opening theme is a banger, honestly. Like I love the opening theme. But the character creation music was my first thing I remember noticing, spending so much time, building a character. And yeah, that was the first time I was like, okay, I'm like, because I was sitting there just kind of like taking my time with it, doing whatever. And I was just really feeling it, getting into it. And I'm like, it's that subtle build that introduces you into the world that I feel like something as, RPG like Wonderlands allows you to play on a lot of those. Yeah, a lot of those experiences you may not have. And like, here is a survival horror game. Here is, a very straightforward narrative. And it makes it a lot of fun. It makes it a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, that's I appreciate you saying that. But I like that piece is, especially in game, like you can like if you listen to it on the OST release, it's a, I can't remember how long it is on the OST release. But it's like a linear piece. But
yeah,
when you listen to it in the game, it actually creates its own variations with different instrumentations at random, like the longer it goes. So you could theoretically listen to it for, I don't know, 6 or 7 or 10 hours. And it won't just be like, all right, it started over. All right, it started over. Like it changes. So
that's so goddamn cool. That layering, like, I can't imagine.
Yeah, and like, if you think about when you're creating a character, you're in there kind of thinking about small variations, like, and you're like, well, should I do this or should I do that? And you're making these tiny little changes, and like the music is doing that too. So that was kind of one of my ideas or intentions with that, was to create, which my music is like generative in its own nature, meaning that it sort of generates its own thing. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I kind of have an idea of the input, but it generates its own thing at a certain point, becomes its own life.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of what I wanted to do, especially with that scene where you are creating who knows what you're going to create, the character wise, like, so yeah, that's cool that you said that.
No, I genuinely, it was one because I first played it on PlayStation, and it was just me like vibing by myself, and when I play PlayStation a lot of time, I spend a lot of time on menus because I'll like get distracted and answer texts and do whatever, because I'm just on the couch and whatever. And so I already spend an obscene amount of time in character creation, especially like Cyberpunk and stuff. I get so just like, I will make the same character every time, but I will spend 2 hours in there like nitpicking it, and it will be the same thing but a slightly different shade of a color. But Wonderlands, yeah, it was truly one of those. I just enjoyed having the menu open when I was like, oh, I want to play this right now, and it really brings you into it. And not every game does do that, but a lot of my favorite games do end up doing that. And it's something that you don't just have to like mute and like forget, like be like, okay, yeah, I'll get to you in a second. Let me finish this. Because it's just like that repetitive theme.
Yeah. Go ahead. It's like it starts over. It starts over.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
When you're playing a game and like you kind of you've memorized the music kind of so well, and you played these parts or the parts of the game so many times to where you're like, okay, here's the second verse, and
here's
then like,
the loop.
Yeah, to start over. Oh yeah, okay, that's where it starts up. Like you kind of think that unconsciously or subconsciously sometimes.
Oh yeah, no, I catch myself doing that. I mean, even in Borderlands 2, but like in pretty much any of the games I go back to from like the late 90s and like 2000s, absolutely. They love the songs, but I will absolutely notice when the xylophone will start, there'll be like that kind of that little bit of wind coming back in. I'm like, oh yeah, that faded out where we started. There you go. And it kind of, it's my own internal clock with it. But I think that's why I really love where games are, going right now, because they do feel much more, I say choice-based very loosely because I love choice-based games in general. But I have been enjoying this trend of games that I wouldn't consider choice-based feeling much more like I'm in control of being able to go and have that almost open world experience. And I'm literally gonna look for it now when I'm playing games, going like, okay, where does the music shift here? Because again, I love stuff like Overwatch, where it's just like, okay, I know this song, I know this map, I know which one it is. Bangers, absolutely, but then the atmosphere of it for sure. I'm curious though, with video games, if it being so modular like that, Sal, do you record with a live orchestra, or is this all like generated at that point? Because I feel like it would be difficult to not have it be synth at that point, but I don't know what people are actually doing with that right now.
Sure. I mean, I would kind of say yes, to all of that.
I love that.
Yes, to all of it. I do a lot of work with VSTs, which are digital instruments. I have libraries all the way from like orchestra to like all kinds of things, all kinds of solo instruments, all kinds of synths, like all kinds of electronic stuff. But I do a lot of stuff with real instruments because I love real instruments, but it just depends on the project. It depends on the budget,
Yeah.
Like I recorded now I'm not a violist at all, but I recorded all the viola or the violin stuff that you hear in Wonderlands. Like,
wait, seriously? That's insane.
With this one.
Oh my! I feel like that counts. I feel like that makes you a violist. Holy shit, that is amazing.
So this is the one that I played all of the Wonderlands stuff on.
How long have you been playing?
Oh, I don't play. Like I can figure out one or two notes and like execute it really well, and then like I'll paste it to the next one. Like I can edit.
I mean, it's half the battle. I feel like that's amazing. That is some innovative shit right there, though.
So I have a whole bunch of instruments, but this was actually part of the thing where I was like, well, what is the identity of Wonderlands going to be? And I imagined like Tiny Tina, like for some reason having a broken like fiddle like in her backpack or something, and just like she was just like a fiddler,
a failed bard vibe. I love it.
I was like, oh, maybe I could find a broken like violin that maybe she found in a treasure or in a chest, a loot chest. Yeah. And so I found this. It only has 3 strings on it. It's not broken, but it's kind of like a broken down instrument. And I was like, well, perfect. So I'm going to start trying to write some themes on this. And like, that's where that whole thing came from. I don't know how well I executed it in the game.
I think that's awesome. I mean, it's a Tina vibe. It's absolutely Tina vibe. I think that nails it. And I love that you found that because it does, it shows how much really goes into that creative intersection from the origin of it. And I think people who are unfamiliar with music a lot of the time, and that don't realize that how much control a composer really does have over the tone of stuff that comes across. And so how important that would be to nail that down. And it's fascinating that you start with this concept of Tina with music rather than, the world of the game. But I love that. I think it works really well for something that is, so like you are the DM, GM, BM, whatever we want to call it, kind of vibe of running through that world. That's fascinating. That's really fascinating.
Totally. Plus there was like all kinds of pirates and skeletons and things like in the game. So I was like, yeah, that totally makes sense to have sort of like some like pirate jig music, which is actually funny that pirate track that I wrote for that game, like everyone hates that track.
Really?
I think it was like is it called the Angry Gamer or something? Or like there's like there's like
something like that. Yeah.
Some big channel where basically they just kind of make fun of anything they can. Yeah. And they took that track like out and they were like, listen to this dumb track. And they were like singing to it and playing to it. And I was like, for a second, I was kind of like, oh, this is kind of embarrassing. But then I was like, well, like they remembered it.
Bad press is good press at that point. No, absolutely. It's a memorable song. You want it to be something people take away from it.
And it was supposed to be annoying because it was in the pirate map where like the pirates are super annoying in that map and you're like constantly trying
they
to
are so fucking annoying.
Yeah. And so like I wrote an annoying tune that I thought a pirate would write on that instrument.
Which is perfect for Borderlands. I yell about this with the movie and everything all the time where people want to be like, this isn't Borderlands. Like Borderlands is annoying though. Like I love it. It's my whole heart and soul. I fucking love Borderlands. Claptrap's annoying. The Calypsos are supposed to be annoying. The pirates are annoying. Tina's annoying. Like it's part of it. It's part of the identity of it. I think, it has a lot of it doesn't take itself too seriously. I feel like this is where I thought Wonderlands really succeeded and were my favorite Borderlands moments seems to be. But when like the characters really take what they're doing seriously, but the world doesn't. And it's very much that like the characters can have fun, but like what they're doing, there is that intention there. We're going with it because the world does allow that whimsical, creative vibe to it in a way where you can deliver some really, really intense stuff in a very casual way sometimes. So my lore brain loves it because I'm a sucker for any video game lore ever. And so I just want to like eat it up. But the way it can be delivered, yeah. And the worlds of Borderlands specifically feel really unique compared to other games. I'm curious if you have like a favorite track that you made. If this is one you're talking about, people always fucking hate. Is there one that you really love or feel like doesn't get enough attention, or you know, anyone you have a soft spot for?
Gosh, was it? I think it was "Climb the Wall of Ragnarok." Is it that one?
I'm gonna just let it play a little in the background. I wanna hear it a little bit. I love it.
The end of that track is one of my most favorite parts of that whole album.
I love that.
When it goes into the big da 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 da. The bass line is like a doom riff that I wrote because I'm really into metal music and doom metal.
Amazing.
So if you just listen to the bass is the contrabass. They're playing this like pretty doomy riff, but I wrote, chords around it.
That's amazing. I love that.
It also kind of sounds like a modern. I would never call myself a Brahms because Brahms was Brahms, but it kind of almost sounds a little bit like that style when I listen to it. I'm like, oh, this is very Brahms of me.
I do. Those moments make me feel so good. If I'm writing something, I'm like, ooh, this is Spielberg. I like I can like tell where you pull it out. You're allowed to love it. I think that's so cool. Do you do work with a lot of strings? I did notice that about the Wonderlands soundtrack specifically. Is that it does feel very orchestral. And I think that works great for the world. Do you just have a preference in general for strings, or are you yeah.
No, it changes for the project. I mean, to me this was D&D, you know what I mean? So I was like, it just has to be an orchestral score.
Yeah.
But with, broken instruments inside of it too, because it's kind of in that world. You're finding things in chests and
piecing it together. Yeah.
But like, just because that's the instrumentation, I wrote, like, if you read the like the description of the album, like my whole goal with that soundtrack was to try to show people things that they didn't know they liked with like many different styles. So I snuck like just about every style that I know that I could into that soundtrack. Like there's minimalism in there. There's like some rock stuff, obviously orchestral stuff. There's, a lot of chromatic atonal stuff in there, but maybe you don't hear it because it's backed with chords and things.
You're tricking people to eat their vegetables and experience your things though. And I think that's rad. I think that's really rad.
There's a lot of beautiful stuff out there. Like, I think that if people listened to things more than once or twice, they'd fall in love with it.
Oh, I agree. I think it's really easy to stay in like, this is what I know and what I love, and, seek that out, which is great. But I mean, a lot of things that Hamilton was like that for me, where I love Broadway, I love hip hop, like both were there. But when I first listened to Hamilton, I was like, okay, it's fine. And didn't sit down and listen to it. And I remember one day I was driving home and Wait For It came on again. And I just like start crying in the car. I'm like, oh, it just hit me. Like it's something clicked. And I feel like some of my favorite music has happened that way. But no, that's, I think something I noticed really when we were talking about doing this, and I was like, okay, let me sit down, like listen to it again. Cause I do have the vinyl. I have the vinyl for Claptastic, Wonderlands and 3, and they'll just be some of my like background as I'm doing stuff, cause they're great music. I love video game vinyls. But I noticed that, and I forgot how much until I was like, recently I was coming back from South by Southwest and I was just listening to it on the plane, just start to finish. And it was so fascinating to me because I kept trying to nail down like a style that I really could recognize from you. And it was so many different styles through the whole thing for me as like a listener going, it does feel like every time I expected to be like, okay, we're doing this very like cinematic, powerful vibe. We have some brass coming in here. We love that. To then, okay, these are all strings. So like almost like that. Kind of like poppy, almost. Yeah. And it was just so unique to me. And I hate to use that word a billion times, but it truly felt like each track had a vision to it. And so imagining how that flows through actually working with the devs making the game and having that fit in there. When I have to replay it and like sit here and like figure out where that does shift, because it does such a good job. And it's amazing to me that listening to the soundtrack that I've already listened to and I own multiple versions of, I still didn't clock how different the tracks can be from each other when they all fit in the same game.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, even like another one of my favorite tracks on that album is The Ditcher. Like it's like a
I like that one,
like,
yeah.
It's kind of like a, they're not making fun of, but it's like a homage to The Witcher.
Yeah.
But so I wrote it kind of in that style, that really like emotion, almost like really emotional orchestral music.
Mm-hmm.
Lower that most of it is like string orchestra with no brass. It's just like really, you know, sensual sounding strings, very close to the string, the microphones and things like that. But yeah, you listen to that and then you listen to like the pirate track, you know, it's like two totally different things. But then you hear like, you know, the character creation stuff, you know, and that's like, because I come from almost an ambient music background. Like I'm very heavy in the underground ambient music scene.
Mm-hmm.
I have like maybe 10 or 15 ambient albums like under one of my monikers. But, you know, I tried to bring everything I had to this, you know, because I felt like it needed it rather than just kind of just cop out and just do this thing. It'll be fine, you know?
Yeah. I feel like that really works though, because I remember I think it was Tangle Drift. That's the one I ended up kept going back and on the plane just like going, there's something that builds here that does feel like that you're gearing up, and the way that I don't even want to say suspense, it's not the right word, but that energy, those stakes like pick up as you're like going. It's such It is such a key part of the experiences in that game specifically. I remember, God, first time actually sitting through playing it, all the butt styling beheading moment, just like absolutely hauling me out.
You're the second person to mention that.
Really?
Yeah,
it wrecked me.
Yeah, the last person that I was chatting with, I think it was a podcast last week. They brought that up and they talked about the music for those. But I was like,
with Riley, yeah. It was a moment.
Yeah, I mean the cinematics are especially different because they are linear. Like,
yeah,
you know, there's no modularity going on there. Like so it is actually like scoring to a film because you're really paying attention to every emotional shift or every like event that happens, you know, or maybe certain events aren't important, so you don't need to color them or, you know, but yeah, I remember that one. I used strings for like in slow motion when it's like the swords going through.
Genuinely, there's a clip of me replaying on stream and I somehow like either blacked out that part or whatever when I like gone through, because I like played it on my own, but I like didn't finish it. I was like, let me finish on stream and let me go back. I'll just restart it. And there's a clip of me just like absolutely like pin drop silent, just watching this in horror, and that music, just the fall of that brightness and everything to this moment. And it was the moment for me in the game where I realized I gave a shit about the story. And like, it's one of those, I have those moments where it's like I'm watching Ted Lasso and I'm 4 episodes in and then go, wow, I'm weirdly invested. I didn't notice this happening. And it was that moment for me with just like that, you allow that moment to breathe so well, but like it hit so effectively for me. And it's, I know that music, like I will sit there and it's great. And I feel like Borderlands doesn't get a lot of those cinematic moments. Like there's not contrary to what people want to say, there's not a lot of cutscenes. There's not a lot of these moments that get to be very like you're sitting here and seeing this fight play out. You don't get to see that story happening. And Wonderlands gets to do that in different ways that the base shooters don't get to do, that I think you took advantage of really well. And again, I think part of that is like the D&D fun of it. And you know, Sam is fantastic and hilarious with a lot of what he does too. So I feel like the creativity of you approaching this in a very these broken instruments and finger finding kind of way really fits with how it feels like he crafts his stories in that way too. And again, just not taking itself too seriously, but being able to produce something that, you know, does have that through line, that emotion, that vision there. And it really comes through. It really comes through.
That's cool.
Yeah. What was the first game you wrote on?
That was actually the first one.
Was it really? Holy shit. I literally tried to look it up and I just assumed there's no IMDb for music composing kind of thing. So it's like, you probably just don't have it listed.
Yeah, it takes a while for some of those IMDb things to update, but
yeah, it's exhausting. Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's the only one I've done for. Oh, well, I'm doing more for Gearbox now.
Yeah.
But
I was going to say, were you in-house at the time for that, or did this kind of like bring you on? Like how early in the process? Clearly very early on with Wonderlands at that point, but like was this years in the making for you, or did you guys just kind of fall in love with each other and you really get this vibe and go?
Yeah, they were contracting me for, I think it was about 6 months, and I was working on some map music for them, and they were really looking to hire an in-house composer.
Yeah.
And I think they were kind of seeing if I was the fit. So yeah, they asked me if I wanted to, and I was like, yeah. You know, after a while, I was like, yeah, let's do it. So
that's fantastic.
Game, and it's like, okay, now I got all these maps to write music for. You know,
I mean, congrats. That's a hell of a way to get in there. But that's an insane debut for game music.
Yeah, right. It's pretty crazy. I hope it's not the only one. Maybe it's like I only do one and then.
No, absolutely not. There's no way. There's no way. I feel like there has to be such an unspoken. I'm not even unspoken, but just like when you look at like movie compositions, and it's very much like you have to understand how stories work, obviously, to write effective music at that point. I feel like the love and understanding of games you have to write for not only games in general, but different types of games. Like, how were you a lifelong gamer? Was this like a passion of yours, or did, like you said, you weren't intending to write game music? Did the game love kind of come later as you figured out this modular thing, or when did that creativity intersection really happen for you?
Yeah, well, the other thing is I actually had been playing games my whole life. I wouldn't call myself a gamer though. Like, it's interesting. Like I would call myself like an artist at heart. That's like who I am. So if I see anything in the world that is of artful value, doesn't matter if it's a painting, you know, or if it's a storyteller, or if it's a writer, or if it's an instrument maker, or a game, or, you know, anything. I become obsessed with it. And
same.
Same.
I don't know how to casually like anything is my whole thing. It's very all or nothing with things I love. Yeah.
And so, I mean, when I was a kid, my parents got me a Sega Master System. Now, this was like, I was born in 1982, so this was like, I think in 1989, maybe those things came out, maybe a little earlier. But I had one of those, and I remember playing Shinobi, and I was like, I mean, I don't know. I kind of fell in love with those games, but I fell in love with games because it was a challenge. It was like, you know, you'd always die, and it's like, I got to beat this. I got to beat this. I got to beat this. And it was just a challenge. And I am kind of a problem solver also. That's what to be an artist is. You're constantly solving problems, you know. And so I have always loved games ever since I was a kid. And I had played them, you know, there had been some years where I wasn't like playing games because I was just doing other stuff. You know, but I always had a console at any time. I mean, sorry if that doesn't answer your question.
No, I love it, dude. You don't need this is free flow, man.
So that's what I was trying to say is I wouldn't call myself a gamer because I'm not like that's not all I'm like, you know. There's so much to know about games. Like there's so many things. There's like lore alone and just like the understanding of like, you probably know more about Wonderlands than I do, but
That's just because I'm obnoxious. It's not because of anything. Like, I am truly obnoxious about lore.
But no, I have loved games my whole life because of all kinds of things, because of the art, just because of what it takes to make them. I mean, so much, craft goes into making something like that, and that's kind of what an artist does, is make stuff, and so it doesn't matter to me what it is, what people are making. But yeah, I loved playing games ever since I was a kid.
Yeah. What you said Sega's the start, but you always said console. What would you consider like your console?
Probably my PS1 was like
PlayStation, man. I like it.
but I mean, I can give you the order. So I had a Sega Master System. I never had a Nintendo, but I did have a Nintendo 64.
Nice.
After that. And then after that, I got a Sega Genesis.
I had a Genesis, baby. That was my first.
Yeah. And oh my God, like I fell in love with Sonic. Like I was beating Sonic. Like, I mean, obviously it was really hard, but like I was obsessed with that game, and like, and the music's so beautiful in that game. I mean, it was brilliant. We ended up getting a PS1. That was kind of when video games were starting to get good again.
Yeah, like, for sure.
I remember I had Tenchu, was like one of those games that really was like, oh my gosh, like this is like when you can like be stealth in video games, and it's not just like a, left to right, like, okay, we're just doing this thing. It's like there's more like ambience. You're just like standing still for a minute because you have to,
yeah.
And obviously I got into Metal Gear after that. And then after that, I got a PS2. And then I had a PS2 like forever.
I still have my PS2.
Yeah, I don't have it anymore, but and it was in 2016, was it? No, maybe it was 2015. I bought a PS3. Like, nice. Because it was super cheap and it was my birthday, and I was like, you know what? Like, I haven't had my PS2 in forever. I'm going to go buy myself a gift. And I didn't have enough money to buy a PS4 because I was super poor. And I just bought a PS3 for like, $150, and, was playing games on that. And then now I have a PS5. So
I had a similar trajectory at the point. Yeah, no, I love mine. I say often that I had a PS1, I had a Sega and stuff, but the PS2 is child support for raising me at a point. Like, it's very the PlayStation 2 was baby, but I still have my 2, 3, 4, and 5 in my apartment because it's so many things aren't verse compatible, and it's things I want to go back and play, like Eco on the 2, and then that's the thing. It's like I love them. I want to be able to go back and play SSX on the PS3, and I was the same though. I got my PS3 really, really late. Because I just so badly want to play The Last of Us, but then I needed a PS4 to play Until Dawn, and 5 was the same. The Quarry was coming out, and I was like, yeah, no, I need it now. Like, it's fine. And it's just consoles for me have been like I only got my PC together like last year or two because I was just always moving apartments and roommates and stuff, and consoles were that entry point for so much. But I love it. I love it.
I mean, I hadn't actually been into PC gaming up until about 4 years ago. So, but that's just because I wasn't really using a PC for anything, like obviously gaming. I'm a Mac user because I work in music, so I'm constantly using Apple. But I mean, I use both now because I'm in game dev, so I'm using Unreal 5 all the time, and you have to use PC for that.
Yeah, that's kind of the split, yeah.
But that allowed me to discover, some new games that weren't on PlayStation. Like, I'm extremely into indie games. Like, I love like Inside. I know that's not indie anymore.
It counts though. It counts, yeah.
But like Little Nightmares and
Little Nightmares is so good. Another great soundtrack.
Oh my God, that anytime someone asks me what my favorite game soundtrack is modern, I always say that soundtrack.
It's amazing. The atmosphere is so good. Yeah, I feel like PC for me was where I got back into like the indie horror gaming. Like, that was a big one for me.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I loved it. And I love like current stuff like, you know, the Phasmo, the Texas Chainsaw, whatever, but it was very
Oh
much
yeah, yeah.
like Outlast for me was
Oh yeah.
so much of a canon event in my brain. And just the type of games where you weren't able to fight back that, you know, they have them on PlayStation, but just wasn't what I was doing. Things like Five Nights at Freddy's and all the little stuff, but Among the Sleep and everything that I just experienced on, you know, any of the Annapurna games like Tattletale and stuff like that were very, very formative for my, you know, dragging me back into gaming in adulthood. I feel like,
Yeah.
because they're so unique. They're so unique.
Oh yeah. I mean, I have kind of a funny story about like when I was playing my PS1 back in those days. Um, I was at I used to always, and I still do love going to old used bookstores.
Oh yeah, they're
And
amazing. They're amazing.
back then, like, and still now they sell like old crappy, not crappy, but they sell like old video games, like
Oh yeah,
outdated PS1 games or whatever. Um,
there's some crappy
and
games in there, but they absolutely sell them. Yeah.
yeah, but I found Silent Hill 1 for PS1, and I was like, I've heard about this game, and I've like, I've always like, this is like, I want to play this game. And it was $20. I remember it was $20 exactly. And it was kind of like one of those scenes in a movie where like a kid is in a bookstore and they find a book and they're like, oh, I'm going to take this home. And they take this book home and it like scares, it's like they think the book is haunted, you know?
It's the
Like,
Stephen King beginning of a movie. Yeah.
yeah. Like, so I remember when I got that game and took that home, that was one of those first real, like, emotional um, feelings that I ever had from a game. Like, hands down, like, when I played that game, like, that game scared the shit out of me. Like,
Yo, it's horrifying. It's fucking horrifying.
but it's not even just like jump scare horrifying. It's like everything they did in that game is like, there is nothing cheesy about that game. Like, that game is truly scary, you
Yeah,
know?
it is.
Um,
It's psychological at that point for sure.
but I felt like it was a new challenge because I was like, okay, like, games are obviously hard and like they're hard, challenging, like challenging in a hard way, but that game was challenging because it gave me anxiety to play it. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I when the first time I played BioShock, I had to blast like pop music in the background at certain points because I was
Yeah.
just so like unsettled by the
Like,
atmosphere.
I mean, luckily I've grown up a little bit and I can play any scary game by myself and be fine and the
Oh,
lights
I
off
have
and
not. I love horror games. I'm a little bitch. They're no things like Amnesia. Absolutely not.
but I remember at certain points, I was like, you know what? I can't play this game by myself because I it's too much, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
Um, yeah. So,
That's why Outlast really got to me because it's the concept of the survival games where you can't fight back, and it's
yeah,
the still it's not like a FNAF thing where you're locked in a room. Like the jump scares are like fine, whatever. Like I enjoy it,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
Outlast was very much that core moment of did I wait long enough? Did I wait too long? Was I actually seen? And you get turned around, you get lost. There's no little mini map. It's very there are enough elements you're having to worry about the whole time. And Portal does that too in a not horror way where it just feels very frustrating in the perfect ways where if you get out of the rhythm of it at all and the
Mhm.
game will give you shit for it. Like I stand by Portal 2 is a perfect
Yeah.
game to me. Like it is a flawless game. And even the moment no matter how many times I've played it and the puzzles don't change and whatever, the moment I get out of rhythm for it, I'm suddenly sitting there going like, I forget. I remember one time playing it, I was getting so frustrated on a puzzle, trying to remember just how to do this room. And my girlfriend was just like, okay, well, like, what are you doing? I'm like, trying to pass a test. I'm trying to get over there. She goes, no, you're making portals. Have you made a portal? And I'm like, yes. And I'm like looking, I'm like, oh, I'm supposed to drop down the thing I had been doing that I just totally forgot about because the game is so good at like just like poking at you and like throwing just enough at you to like elevate that challenge. And again, it's the atmosphere of it. It's truly atmosphere. It was just like, okay, here's a new Wordle puzzle. Here you go. It wouldn't be nearly as effective.
Yeah.
But they're so
And
good at that.
even though that game isn't a horror game, like surrealism can actually be pretty horrifying and
Oh yeah.
terrifying because
Oh yeah.
it's altering like what's normal. And that's what I think was so brilliant about the Silent Hill 1 and 2 games was that they used many different types of horror. They used jump scare once in a while. They used the unknowing, type of scare. They also used surrealism. There's this one part where, like, I'll never forget that. That actually gave me chills when that happened. There's this one part where you go into, I think it's Silent Hill 3 actually, but you go into this room and there's a big mirror and you're standing there and you're looking around in the mirror and the mirror changes with you. And I was like, oh, this is really weird. If I stand still, music starts to crescendo. And I was like, okay, that's weird. What happens if I just stand here for a long time? So I stood there for a long time and the music got louder and I was like, all right, I'll walk away. And I walked away and my reflection in the mirror didn't change. It stayed where it was.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, holy crap. It gives me chills even to say it now, but it was one of the most, like, it was really scary. It scared me. I was like, wow. And that's like so brilliant, like,
oh, absolutely.
So I don't know. I know that's a tangent, but
oh, dude, I'm only tangents, only rants. That is the whole vibe here. You're perfect. And I think that those moments are like why I just love games so much, because I love movies, I love TV, I love books, like you're saying, art. I just really appreciate when I get into something, I get really into it. But the concept of making a game and being able to know that this could be the first game someone ever plays, but then also anticipating the fact that people can try to do pretty much anything, and how you anticipate what you're allowing and what you're really feeding into there. And I talk all the time, even just with like making maps, where it's like you play something like The Last of Us, where like intuitively you just kind of know where to go, and it's like blended in the environment versus a mini map kind of thing alone is like, oh, that's fascinating. But the concept of like, okay, a player who stands in the mirror for X amount of time, or you do this and you have to like the music doesn't just like stop and restart, or it's not just like, oh, the same thing happens. And it has to be able to build that suspense, but that's not something that inherently people are going to do or even notice at that point.
Yeah, they're teaching you subconsciously to stare into that mirror, because they're giving you a clue by when you stand still for 2 seconds, music starts playing, but when you move, it goes away. And you're like, oh, that's interesting. How long can I stand here for?
Yeah.
Little do you know, like, they're trying to get you to stand there, It's just
so good.
Yeah,
it's so good. Like I love when they play on your expectations, for sure, like that. And I think it's the blend of things. Like, have you played Alan Wake 2 yet? Are you an Alan Wake guy?
I haven't. No, I think they're great games, but I just don't have that much time.
I can't imagine. Yeah, no, it's absolutely fantastic. And I felt this with Control, because Control is a game that I didn't even realize the first time I played it isn't linear at all. Like, however, wherever you go, that's where the story goes. And that blows my mind, because even things like Cyberpunk, that's like an open world, like there is an act you follow. Here's a prologue, here's an act, is what you do. And so Control, all the elements that went into that. It's always this George Clooney quote that pops in my head, where he says making a movie, like making a good movie is an accident half the time, because there are just so many people, I'm paraphrasing, but just so many people involved in the process, that a movie turning out being a great movie is a very happy accident, because, these visions and, the investors and producers, it's just so many things. And I think about that often with Control and Remedy in general, like when with their mixed media, love at that point, like Quantum Leap and stuff like that really, really was before its time, I feel like. But Control felt so specifically immersive in a way that I didn't expect, that then Alan Wake does pretty much the opposite, where it's like, no, this is a story you're following. And same with the original Alan Wake, where it's very, action adventure kind of Tomb Raider-esque kind of game, but it builds those moments of like, oh no, that is video game sound that gives me anxiety when you suddenly, hear this. And it's the identifying little, like, here's the sound of the clicker, here's, this heavy music, here's something that is within this world the character's creating. So it's like the meta of, this isn't actually the character you're talking about, this is one he wrote, but it's also not him. And it gets so deep that all the emotional elements you have to account for when composing that, I imagine, or, working with a team on that is, imagine exhausting. I mean, I can't imagine how many iterations that really does take to nail that the way you want to nail it, because there are so many cooks in the kitchen with those moments.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, it's a hard question. I know it's not a question, but it's kind of a hard problem to solve because you don't really want too many iterations because if you like try to pick away at something until it's this like thing that you can't actually know what it is, you know?
Yeah.
Um like you can ruin it. You
Oh, for
can
sure.
you can make it so that there are no, happy accidents and there are no like cool little things that just happen. Like I think that this is like a philosophical thing with my own work, but my own work is really like to have as little control as possible with obviously with some limitations in there. Like I do have control over some things, but it's I don't know. So you kind of hope for like that you hit the mark in the first couple of iterations. And if you don't, then you're just kind of like, okay, just make this thing like this thing and this thing and like, so and that comes with practice because sometimes you don't hit the mark, and
I feel like the
yeah,
problem I run into with a lot of stuff like that is when I know more than what my audience will know. And when
yeah,
I'm going that many edits and iterations deep or rewrites deep, it becomes a problem where I become blind to the fact that I am assuming this amount of knowledge that the the audience won't actually have. And so I lose some of those beats from the beginning that I really loved. And that's the thing. Like, are you killing your darlings or are you, suddenly making this, not as impactful because you're not allowing that exposition in there in the same
yeah.
way?
I mean,
Yeah.
I think that there's definitely a balance to be found in that, but also I'm kind of I you have to leave something for your audience to find too. you
Yeah,
know?
you
Like
really do.
I mean, I don't know if like you're a fan of The Office or
Oh, yeah.
whatever, but it's the kind of show that and Severance is like that too now.
I'm actually rewatching Severance right now, and I just finished rewatching The Office, and yeah,
Dude, I have watched Severance over a dozen times. Like and every time I watch it, I'm like, "Holy crap, I've never watched this."
me with
Like,
30 Rock, me with Arrested Development, I can quote every single line of it, and I will still find a new layer, specifically in like Arrested Development, where it just feels like I'm experiencing it for the first time.
yeah. And like I know that not everyone in the like your audience like they kind of want to just chill and play a game. Like I know that not everyone should think that way, but it is kind of nice to know that there's stuff in there for you to find too, because I mean I think that's what keeps people playing some of these Borderlands games, like is that they find new things too, but there's also a comfort level there of like, yes, like I'm expecting this to happen and I love this. Um, that's
Yeah,
like we all play games like that. Like, I have my own games that I play for that reason. But so I always kind of sternly side with that, where it's like, well, maybe you guys, you don't know as much as I'm expecting you to know, but that's okay. Like, I want to leave a treasure chest for you to find things in, like anytime you go in, and not just be like, oh, this is just I get this game 100%, cool, whatever, it's done. You know, um,
yeah.
that's what makes it a classic too, is that people always go back because they're like, holy crap, we didn't even realize this was going on. Um, David Lynch is a perfect example of this kind of creator. Like,
100%.
and as an artist, like the people that are making games, they're artists. They're not, they are sort of audience too, but they're kind of artists at heart. And like, they want to make things bigger than the audience understands. If you're just trying to make something that the audience understands, then you might just be trying to sell tickets to the show.
I
You know what I
argue
mean?
that all the time because it's so much like the actor in me will find myself arguing people about, this is something we are given in a game and this is the intention, therefore this person is bad or good, or it's let me real it's Handsome Jack. People argue me a lot about Handsome Jack. And I'm
Sure.
just like, it is always more interesting for a character to care and have a motive. Like villain, not whatever, like there's stuff that we don't know that the writers or even seen, like any of the setting elements that are put in here for a reason that we don't always get to see and like know. And so I'll like explain some like really weird notes I've gotten in scripts before where people are like, oh, we can't tell she's depressed, make a prescription bottle over here. And I'm like, that literally is not, then it's not for you. She's obviously depressed. Too much, well, that's too much. And it's things like that where you don't have to spell it out a lot, but like there are things that don't make it to the forefront of the audience, but like I will still be sitting here playing this game, have thousands of hours in Borderlands. And people look at me like I'm crazy. Like I just got a Borderlands tattoo and the artist was like, so when did you finish playing this game? I'm like, LOL. That's cute. Never. I'm trapped here. But I will still look for things to like be like, oh my God, I've never noticed that before. These little beats or, you know, this cut content and the way a line is delivered where I go on my rabbit hole. And I don't expect people to consume media in that way. Like I'm neurodivergent. I'm very into it. But I love that there is stuff like that in games where I can play it a billion times and still sit here and hope to find something new. Even if I don't, even if I've discovered every little bit of it, you know, the returning themes are always what gets me. If to bring it back to the music side of that, where it's that concept, if I can't imagine how much that you do, like if this map doesn't end up in the game or these characters don't end up in the game or, you know, whatever, what you really lose there of some of the love you put in there. But I love just noticing little beats come back in the music, because it's not a copy paste. It's so intentional with that moment or that that setting. And I can go on my own tangent for that, but it's I eat it up as a story person. I absolutely eat it up because it just will validate what I'm doing. If I'm like, his theme came back here, like this is a little beat here, this is the same thing, and I put on my tinfoil hat and make a whole conspiracy theory. But I it's one of my favorite things. It's one of my favorite things about games.
It's a very difficult thing to do too. Like when you're writing themes, like because you have that in your mind of like, well, these are going to come back many times, and how many different kind of emotional states can I make with this 3 notes? You know what I mean? Or this set of 3 notes or 4 or 5 notes. Can I make this a rock tune? Can I make this a ballad? Can I make this a beautiful string orchestra? Can I make this an opera? Can I make this, you know, Steve Reich minimalist piece? Like, you know, it's, like I was saying before, I tend to try to not have too much control, even in the thought process when that goes, because I just have to understand that it's bigger than I am, and I'm just going to like do my best with it. you know? But these are the things that you definitely think about, like, well, this will probably work for a handful of these things. Okay, let's go with it. And, you know, when we run into problems, let's try to do our best to fix them, you know.
What's your favorite part of the process? If you'd like to be, you know, not too involved at that point, is it like the very beginning, getting super excited about it, or is it like the finish line?
My favorite part of it is listening to my tracks on the roof, like, and having a couple of cocktails up there and just like full blast. Like I'm talking like I'm like on the roof by myself, you know, but like listening to tracks that I made that day full blast and thinking they're great, you know, but like going through months of that. Let's say you're in month 3 or month 4, and then you're going back and you start seeing, you know, the progress, and you forget because you've made so many things. You're like, oh my God, I don't even remember making this, you know? And so my favorite part of the whole thing is seeing it unfold. But ultimately the listening experience.
I love that. Are you ever, I do this all the time. I like dialogue where I'll like be driving and suddenly I like have like a very clear like beat in my head or a scene, and I like have to like record it real quick or like scratch it down. Like, do you sing, call yourself and leave the voicemail singing to yourself kind of thing, or getting it out of your head?
I have been blessed and cursed with a very, very, very good memory.
Oh, I'm so jealous. My ADHD does not allow me to have that.
Yeah, but it came from like I'll say specifically remembering tunes, okay? Because I'm thinking about art and music in my art practice constantly. So I'm always kind of in a checklist of like, oh, am I trying to remember something that I did 2 hours ago? And be like, oh yeah, that theme that I was thinking of. And then I'll just remember the intervals that they were of the theme and be like, oh, okay.
I love that. I'm so jealous.
Like it's definitely a practice though to be like, okay, I could write this down right now, or I can be like, think about it the whole way home, keep your mind on it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then when you get home, like put it out on the keyboard. So do your best to not forget. So if you practice that over and over, you don't have to do that always, but you get actually pretty good at being like, oh yeah, I'm going to put down that theme.
My hyperfixation, if I think of an emotional beat, something like that, will be like, this is suddenly all I can think about. It's 3 a.m. and I'm thinking about this. But if I have an idea of something, I'm like, if I so many ideas will pop up. I can't choose the ones that my brain goes, this is what we're remembering and the hill we're dying on, versus, oh, that's a great idea, I'll totally remember that, because those are always the ones I'm like, oh, I lost it. And I can't imagine with music theory how that would go.
But I mean, to answer your question though, the answer is yes. I always write these ideas down. Like,
I love that.
But I like to, this is part of my process, but I like to know that I can be completely dependent on myself, even if I don't have paper or a pencil, that I can remember like what I'm, trying to do.
Well, yeah, you're inspired. You have the vision in there, and I think that's a lot of it is if you know what it's not just a random beat popping in your head. If you have that intention there, it's gonna come the right time. I feel like. Do you have any old school ones, or any that you really inspire you? I would say, yeah, or that you aspire to do something like that, or are you really enjoying?
I think what I truly inspired to do is like a game. If it's going to be on a game, then it would be a game where like the art, and when I say art, I mean, the art spirit of every aspect of it is like priority. It's not like how many tickets can we sell?
Yeah, it's the passion behind it.
That is also a very hard thing, because you can be your own, I wouldn't say worst enemy, but when you're like, I'm going to make the most amazing thing ever, like that is all of a sudden in your lap. And now you're like, okay, like I have to basically do everything that I think of, or at least, look at it or think about like, is this going to work or not?
Yeah.
So earlier games, like it's hard for me to say what inspires me, but what truly inspires me are games like these indie games, like Inside, Little Nightmare, like a lot of them. The Plane Effect is a new one, which is, oh my God, it's so good.
I'll have to check it out. I haven't yet.
To be able to make something like that someday, where it's like, we're really just focused on making the most creative thing that we could possibly make. Like to me, that's like what David Lynch does with his work. Like he isn't concerned one bit if someone thinks like his scene is going to be too long or too short, or isn't going to be like, he doesn't give a shit about that. And like, not to be like too forward, but I am kind of the same way when it comes to making art, because you're making a vision that's yours. Now, when you're working in mainstream, like you're trying to make something for a lot of people, so that doesn't always work. You have to do certain things.
But I also really do subscribe to the idea that something made for everyone is made for no one. Like you have to at a point have that point of view. And I remember, I don't even remember how long ago it was, but it's been circling again recently that Randy had a quote talking about Borderlands has a ceiling at a point because of the art style, like of the types of people it would reach. And I'm like, but that's so much of the soul of it and what people do love about it, that another hyper realistic game, another Fallout-like game like Borderlands happening as it happened was such a happy accident. I feel like from everything we've heard of one and the evolution of it, that you could change an art style and make it less cartoon, more grounded, but you lose so much of like the freedom of like the fun music, the humor of it, the lightness of it, the weirdness of it, that I think is why people come back to it and why people really remember it at that point. Because if it's just another pretty shooter game out there, at what point does it start to lose some of that personality and that passion?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think we have seen a lot of that with modern games just now, is like, when I say now, I mean past 5-10 years, but
the hyper realistic,
Yeah, but it's like if you wanted to right now go find a first-person shooter that was beautiful, you would be able to pick from like, I don't know, 1,000 or something, you know?
Yeah.
But 20 years ago, 25 years ago, you know, like you're like, oh, here's two, you know, like, oh, I know of Doom, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and so I think you nailed it on the head by saying trying to make someone for everything is like making something for no one. I mean,
Yeah. It's
um,
just,
and I think that's why some of these games are ultimately failing, because they're more focused on that rather than, you know, being true to their brand or to their art form or whatever, you know.
I think one of the best examples of that, like working out for people when they don't do that of recent time is Baldur's Gate 3. I feel like that's a game that a lot of, a lot of people and people with a lot of money and a lot of investors there didn't expect to do what it did. And it set out to make the exact game it wanted to make. And
Yeah.
at least that's what it feels like with the finished product. And people are still talking about it. People are still playing it every day. Every day on the computer I just see more people in Steam like just launched Baldur's Gate 3, now playing Baldur's Gate 3. And
Yep.
I didn't even know if there was 1 and 2 at that point. I had to go back and look. I'm like, oh, these were top down. These were like it very much didn't listen to the, well, people don't want this insanely massive D&D RPG
Mm.
story. And I feel like it's so much like Critical Role was doing a lot of it to push D&D more mainstream, obviously, but the Baldur's Gate I feel like really broke that threshold for people where it's people are experiencing it for the first time. Like I'm experiencing a lot of it for the first time. I'm in a campaign right now that's taken over my whole life, and we started it, months ago at this point, but it's something I wanted to do forever. But it was still one of those things where D&D was a little bit more like, I'm obviously a nerd, I'm obviously out there, but it wasn't as common and casual people talking about it. And Baldur's Gate blew expectations on the water, but it's so specifically what it is. Like
Yeah.
there's no game I can really compare it to when people really point to it. And I feel like that's where we get a lot of the clones of that. But why Borderlands specifically, I have a hard time telling people games to play like it, where they're like, oh, like I'm tired of playing Borderlands right now. What do I go do? I'm like, Borderlands pre-sequel? Like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, here's a different one, because there's no, people say Destiny's the closest, but it's like, yeah, it's a looter shooter, but it's not what
Mm.
Borderlands is. And the
Yeah.
creativity that really allows with a lot of that, it's my favorite, one of my favorite things about the franchise. Did
Yeah, I've
you
experienced
did you
that
play?
too, actually. Like there aren't a lot of I couldn't really find a FPS that is like Borderlands or Wonderlands. I mean,
Yeah.
eh,
If it's out
they're
there, I
all
would
they're
love to know it. I would love to know it, but I haven't. I found a few things that are kind of art style of more indie games, like Friends vs. Friends
sure.
just came out, that have like that, not cell shading, but the kind of
Mm.
married in between that's all the cell shading and then the outlining and all that, where it's, it works, but it's still not the game. It's still not what it is. It's not
Sure.
remotely the style of game. But no, were you playing it at all before you came on for Wonderlands, or was this a all new entry for you?
No, because I'm like, I'm like at heart, I am purely into independent arts. Like I am like, I don't really watch any mainstream films. Like I'm really into independent films, independent
Yeah,
games. Um, I do think that these games are fun, but um, they just don't hold my interest
in the same way.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, in the same way. Doesn't mean that it's good or bad. It's just
No, I dude, I feel you. I feel you. I'm a indie movie hoe. I some of my favorite games are, very what people would consider small indie games that very much are part of my like core love for
yeah.
a lot of genres. What are some of your favorite indies then?
I just saw a recent one called Bardo. Have you heard of that?
I think I've heard of it. I haven't seen it. Did I vote in that one?
Bardo is actually a
Oh,
term
it's a
for
Netflix. It's on Netflix. Yeah, it's a Netflix
yeah,
movie.
yeah. I saw. Well, I actually saw it in the theater. I saw it. They had it playing in a theater. Oh my gosh, yeah, that movie
A
is
Mexican
incredible.
epic psychological black comedy drama film. That is a sentence. I am here for it.
Yeah,
Oh, it's by Alejandro. Yeah, no, I was just ranting about Birdman the other day. I'm so
Yep.
surprised. I probably did. Was this nominated? It's probably where I know it from. And
But I mean, there's tons. Like, I mean, the mainstream ones. Like I love all of David Lynch's
yeah,
work. I still watch Eraserhead. I mean,
I mean it's great. So
also I'm a big fan of Harmony Korine. He wrote. Well, he made the movie Kids. He also made the movie Gummo.
yeah,
But it's funny because I've been exposed to a lot of amazing art when I was a little kid. Like, um, my parents are very like my dad is very artistic and music, but he was showing me all kinds of music when I was a kid. Like I was listening to like Miles Davis and John Cage and Pierre Boulez and like I mean like I'm talking like wide range.
yeah,
Like Pierre
an
Boulez.
actual sampling. Yeah,
Yeah, Pierre Boulez is like back then like extreme modern music, and then Miles Davis is like not. It's the opposite, and all kinds of stuff and metal but so I was watching and I probably shouldn't have been, but that was back in the day when we got cable for the first time and the IFC channel was there, and that's where I saw Gummo for the first time when I was like, gosh, I don't know,
most of the
12 years
movies
old.
that for me I saw way too young, but I love them. Yeah, I
Yeah,
get that. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, those are some of them for sure.
I totally understand that vibe though, because I one of the most embarrassing things about me is that I have a Tarantino tattoo, and I always come out the gate with that. But it's because Reservoir Dogs,
Oh
for
yeah.
me was just yeah, it's
Yep.
what unlocked something screenwriting in my head. That and West Wing honestly were just like
Mm,
the cadence of it. I was musical to me. Is how I describe it to people. Where it is something that activated very young in my brain of this is this is storytelling. And Reservoir Dogs is something that I feel like couldn't really be made the same way now, at least not in a big budget kind of way. And I love the path of Tarantino movies. Like I love Inglourious Bastards, I love Django Unchained, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I thought was great, all that, but there's nothing that has touched the magic of even Jackie Brown. But like Reservoir Dogs was so truly for me a cinematic masterpiece at that point.
mm.
And a lot of like Mulholland Drive was like that for me, going back to
Oh yeah.
Lynch. And like yeah, it's so many defining moments. I joked about Spielberg earlier, but I feel like his early stuff, while still massive budget and these movies,
Mm,
Jaws, arguably also a perfect movie with everything going wrong behind the scenes, and this young
yeah.
director coming up and winging it at almost a point that couldn't be made now in the same way. And I feel like indies, like true indies, really do get a lot of the chances to make something that iconic still, because you're not
Yeah.
dealing with all the cooks in the kitchen and all the money and all the how much are we selling, you're making your movie.
They're taking risks too. Like you got to remember that, large corporations that are making films or games, you know, there's a lot of money, and when you're,
Yeah,
trying to make something with a lot of money, you're kind of there's a lot of, just investors and whatnot, but there's a lot of people that have a decision in that. It was like, well, I don't know, that's too big of a risk. Like you probably shouldn't do that. And they're like rightfully so too, because a lot of them understand the market and they understand what's going to sell and what's not going to sell. But that's where you're talking about what's going to sell and what's not going to sell. Like,
hmm
you know, George Lynch is like Dali, he's making art because it has to be made.
yeah.
Like, he'll die on that, whatever that may be. I can't remember what the term is.
Yeah, no, he'll die on the hill of it. Like, yeah, this is absolutely what needs to be made. And I think that's the beauty of I don't know, just art in general. There's a more coherent way to say that if I had my Adderall today, would probably find it. But it's for me, like people don't even realize when legal comes in and has to kill a lot of things. And when you're dealing with something so big, like God, there was a tweet not too long ago when I think it was talking about rebooting Battleborn or something, and Rainey was breaking down, oh, probably like 40 million if we went. It's like, oh, and like something that small, that's a lot,
Hmm.
like theoretically that small. Like I don't think
Yeah,
people realize, one, the money in games, and then two, where it does matter, where we talk about crunch and stuff, where it's like if
yeah,
shareholders need a release date by XYZ for this return for whatever, a lot of people who are disconnected from the art of it don't give a fuck. And it's hard. That's still something you have to balance at a point when things, get so big. It does come with that double-edged sword of, you have more resources to do things and you have a wider audience, but you have way more things to answer to. You can't make the thing that legal, it makes you a little bit nervous about, and they go, no, you need to cut that. Or you could offend someone, or it's, it's not worth the risk of cutting off this market, or then can your game release in this country if it has these elements? And Borderlands already takes so many risks that I feel like that a lot of companies wouldn't. Like Borderlands has been diverse. Yeah, absolutely. And it's phenomenal. We keep coming back to the concept of when things are good, it's, almost shocking at a point. But when you do have that big of a company to answer to. Sure, yeah. But yeah, that's why I think the collaborative experience of video games is so important too. And I have I'm a little not gatekeepy, but it's the concept of like I want people to see like through the looking glass of game dev and what it takes to actually make a game. Like give us the documentary making of Wonderlands and Borderlands 4 and like all this stuff, to be sitting here going like, oh yes, this is actually how I think it's, because it would give an understanding to a lot of the subsections of mobs online who assume that the armchair dev, like this is what's happened. And I tell people all the time that like no one sets out to make a bad game, no one sets out to make a bad movie. That's never the case. And so do we need something for like whatever, companies are companies at a point, like we're all at a point, but the art that goes in making games are one of the only forms of like media we consume right now, where I feel like truly the teams behind it, like take away all the money, take away whatever, the teams behind it are there because they love what they're doing and they want to do it. Because there's so many people working on like movies and TV sets, stuff who are so, everyone gets shaded, but like they have no idea how a movie gets made and they're somehow on the set kind of thing. Same with musicians. I've seen music producers who for like mainstream like pop kind of stuff, who they put it like it's the machine of it. But there's such a core in games that I feel like you have to have a passion for games to be able to sit through and go through the process of making a game, and how long as it takes, and the things you come up against for it. It truly is a labor of love.
Well, even the biggest game companies right now, they started out as indie.
Yeah.
Like, no matter how you put it, they started out as, I don't know, 5 or 10 or 15 people companies. You know what I mean?
It wasn't an industry plant to come into a thing. It
they had a vision for a game, and like, so you're right by that, because that is what the heart of game dev is, because like that's where it starts, and I think that's why I always go back to indie as like that's just my jam, because to me that's like it's kind of like the heart of what game dev is to me. It's everything, and it's also just the pure spirit of it, not that like big companies aren't and whatnot, like they definitely have it in there, but it's
no, there's a difference. There's a difference. I mean, like I love Resident Evil, for example. I was so excited for the Resident. I forget that Resident Evil is like the origin of the current zombies in media. Like it blows my mind that is what started it, because Resident Evil, like Borderlands, is such its own niche. It's corny, but it's intense, and it's still horror. Like Resident Evil 7 alone, I played that in VR, and that was fucking horrifying in VR in such a good way. I think it's honestly better than 8, and I love it. I cosplay Lady D. Like I really love so much of the Resident Evil games, but they do such a good job of still feeling like this is a game that like if you told me a small team was making this game and moving on, I would probably believe it. Like it just feels like the vision is there. And that's what's really interesting to me with, games that end up feeling massive that aren't. And Cyberpunk, I made that mistake with too. It was, we were cosplaying Rogue and Pan Am at PAX West last year. And we were just like, my girlfriend and I were just over in the corner, like, taking photos and everything. Like we just got to the center. We're just decompressing for a second. And we had this guy run over to us, and he was He was PR for CD Projekt Red, and he was like, "Oh, I'm here like all the teams in Europe." He's like, "I saw the yellow, had to run over, and we were talking." And it's like they are a small company, and like when he's
Yeah.
giving his card, I did not realize how small that was for a game that got this much attention and this much scrutiny and this much love. But the CPR they did for that game with that small of a team, with that much money through that many years, like those are people who believed in the story of their game and wanted that game to be what it could be. And I'm so glad they did because it's one of my favorites. But I think people have a real disconnect for the concept of like, if a game is popular, that means this many people are on it. Or, you know, I see this a lot with, honestly, with people complaining about Gearbox Software. It's, you know, oh, if they are making this, if they're doing this instead, then it takes away, you know, whatever, like take New Tales. And people are like, oh, we could be getting Shooter if they're not a choice-based person or whatever. I'm like, there are different teams that do different things, or it's good that we have writers involved in all of them. And, you know, it keeps a through line of thought. Like, I think the amount of people it takes is really lost because indie games can get so successful and so mainstream and so good. So you have stuff like FNAF that, you know, was one person at the time making it, or Phasmophobia, one person at the time making it, who've now brought in people, but became a hit what felt like overnight for gamers. And so it feels like, well, then that fix can come overnight, or then this is where the attention needs to be. And games are fascinating to me in that process because you have to take so many things into account that you wouldn't in other forms of media.
They really are. And I like to say that like games are like the next evolution of film, because film is older than than not games, but you know, than
video game. Yeah.
multimedia game.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we've actually learned a lot from film, because film was kind of the birth of this medium in a way, even though it's two different things. But, you know, it's just a new thing to discover. You know, now we're making movies, you know, that can change depending on how you want it to change. You know,
I mean, Bandersnatch, yeah, absolutely. Like
and now with like emerging technology, we're gonna be making games that it's not just like, you know, the game is a little bit different if you make this thing. It's like there's going to be engines that like create a completely different soundtrack based on your behavior. And like, you know, I mean, we're talking about some really like amazing things happening in the horizon. Like, I remember we used to think like, oh, the graphics for video games are going to be so amazing in 20 years. And it's like, now they are amazing, but it's like, you don't care about the graphics anymore, because like, who cares how real it's going to look? It's like, I need something more than realism. Like, they started doing this with painting. Like, when realism started to, not that it has gone away, but when realism started to go away and there were things like cubism and people were starting to do, you know, make abstractions of things they already knew. You know, some people hated it, some people loved it, but
yeah,
you know, that is an example of not just new technology, but it's an example of like evolved thinking. You know what I mean? Because now we're like, well, okay, if anybody practices, they can learn how to paint a picture really well. Like, well, now what? Now what can you do?
Yeah.
Like, how creative can I be? You know? So I kind of think that's where games are right now. And, you know, which is exciting, you know?
Have you heard of the game Nevermind? I think it's Nevermind, yeah.
No, I have not.
So I haven't played it yet, but I bought it the moment I saw it. But it's an indie game on Steam that it learns how you're acting and will take in like your pupil dilation or heart rate if you have that in there, but otherwise how you're playing the game, and the game will change around you and like make it more psychologically. Yeah.
Oh, thanks for reminding me about this game.
I literally bought it the moment I saw it, and years ago, and I've been a little bit of a bitch to play it, but I also just like, that fascinates me. But you're talking about how the concept of like music evolving and stuff like that. I'm really curious how it works with that, because I mean, yeah, that tension and release is so much a part of, you know, any type of suspense. Slenderman does it really well, you know, all those like, you know, quiet, you know, ambient things, but something like that does adapt to how you are interacting with the story becoming commonplace as a concept in the future of games is mind-boggling, because we do have again, I go back to soundtracks from 1999 and 2001 that I'm sitting here and I will be on my Spotify video game playlist of just like, yeah, I'm like vibing to this. And, those are very the stop and start kind of tracks, or you'll be walking in a room and then like someone spots you where you shouldn't and the music changes. There's none of that, the gradualness that comes with a lot of what we're talking about. And so, but yeah, you hit on the nail with the head with the graphics, because people now are like, oh, the teeth aren't realistic, but who cares about that, But that's why Cyberpunk, I hate to keep going back to it, but was so interesting for me was that the NPC interactions were just as you're around there, the conversations you could be hearing, insane. Like the depth of that game is insane.
Because they are generative. Like those conversations are generative. Like it's an AI system that is like Chat GPT in a way, having a conversation with itself. And it's like, whoa, that's pretty deep.
Literally. But it allows so much of that replayability and freedom of it that it feels like you're looking for that Easter egg of something that you may not have found. And it's so immersive. Like there was a debate on Twitter that was just like CD Projekt Red is debating making the sequel to Cyberpunk third person. And I was like, I feel like Cyberpunk was the first game that really convinced me, even subconsciously, that no, it would lose something not being first person. Like first person is part of that immersion. When I grew up playing, I was very much third person adventure games were, the pinnacle. And so I never thought about it. I was like, no, Tomb Raider's great. Like whatever, like first person was foreign to me. Spider-Man on PS4, fantastic. Didn't need first person. BioShock is one of the only other ones I would argue. Portal, but that's just more mechanics. But BioShock 1 specifically was so much of the like, even just that going back to the first would you kindly that you don't have control over, where if it were in third person that would feel different. Like it truly feels personal at a point. But things like Borderlands, things like, the type of games that people come back to a lot, Overwatch, Apex, whatever, I feel like wouldn't have that kind of immersion needed. But I love that we're adding more of those tidbits, those lore, those themes in even like repetitive hero shooter games, because there are so many options to have this expansion and have these either cinematics or, character themes come up that really deepen, I feel like, people's attachment to it. Like people laugh at me about getting so into Overwatch now in 2023, 2024, but it grabbed me with the atmosphere, the color, the fast pace of it. But if lore and the feeling of it, the atmosphere catch me at all, like my brain hooks on that, I'm gonna dive in. And it's the little tiny interactions or the little themes or the things built into the few cinematics, I say few objectively, but that we do have, that really allow something like what would feel like basic for a hero shooter, which there's so much that goes into it, but you know what I mean? It's, you have an objective, you get the objective, you do the thing. It feels like you're getting something new every time, even when you're not. And yeah, the different types of creativity you have to keep generating that kind of thing. Cause we're talking about the, Chat GPT kind of vibe of constantly needing that generation. At what point with like making music is it just, well, I've done something like this before. Like you keep having to have this new atmosphere, this new idea, the themes you want to revisit, but recreating these vibes in such unique ways that I imagine is a never ending process. Like I say that as a writer who, I will write every day till I die. At that point, I fucking love writing. But it's a lot of times I'll see a very common through line of thought in what I do, even if it feels very different.
I mean, we're sort of talking about AI and like there's this whole kind of people are either this or that for it. But my whole thing is like, what's going to come out of AI is only going to be as good as the questions that you ask it. You know what I mean? And I know that you're not always going to be asking it a question. I'm using that as a metaphor for like the input is what matters. You know what I mean? Like the input into that system is what matters. And, artists, if anybody, have, the ultimate creative input to be like, oh my gosh, what would happen if we asked it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so people kind of have this idea that it's just going to be able to like, read every book we've ever written and then just create masterpieces. And it's like, well, it'll be able to create masterpieces based on the things it's read. But imagine what we're going to do with it when artists are able to actually like
Utilize
use it
it.
to create novelty. You know what I mean? Like, I think that that's really cool. And I think that that's something that people should think about a little bit more when they get on that subject, because it is very easy to be like, oh, I'm never going to have a job again because it's just going to be able to do cell shading and I won't have to do that. And it's like, well, you never know. I mean, there's a lot of things, that are really positive about it.
I think, it's like also AI's been around for ages in our life and in different parts of this process that are very, it's a scary, we go back to, 2001 and, computer saying hello. We go back to T2 and, the Skynet idea. And all this stuff is very much there. And I have a lot of strong feelings for a lot of reasons with the different jobs I have. But I feel like it's,
Me too.
yeah. And I feel like as a creative, it's that excitement of when there's a new trend and the grifters come out and they're like, here's like the new NFT kind of thing versus like what's the actual use case going to be? Because I feel like it's going to allow more creativity when people figure out how they want to use it. Because you're right, it's the input that matters, it's the application that matters. But like AI have been in creating our games, they've been in our phones, we have Alexas, we have, all the stuff everywhere where it's very much a part of what we do. But technology at its core is when it inaccessible becomes, limiting. And that's not what technology is supposed to do. But technology growing can only assist in what we want to do when used, with an intention. I feel like other than just like, let's make money making money. And that's about, I think where it gets scary for people. But I feel like that's part of the whole advancing tech.
I know that it's going to be more intense than it is now, but if you relate it to 35 or 40 years ago, when if you wanted to make music, you had to go into a music studio to record music. Right now, you can download a free sequencer or a DAW onto your computer for free, and it comes with free instruments. They might not be that great, but you can record your own music on the cheapest computer possible. Everybody has access to it, and like a lot of my work I do is in this room with that technology, like, so it's going to be a version of that. Like it's going to, like, people are going to be able to do what they want to do without having to go into the studio.
It's going to make things more accessible once we, And
it doesn't mean that we don't still have studios. Like
exactly.
I went into the studio, last week. Like, I mean, we still go into studios. Like I'm building a studio, So, that's. I think it's important for people not just to be. I don't remember what the word is, but super positive about the things that they're scared of, but also to think like there are, reasons to be positive about these things. Just I'm positive because,
I feel like also we have to remember that, and again, it's scary when we talk about like the shareholder aspect and the trickle down of that, but go back to talking about the love for indie games. And theoretically people are going to try to do a lot of stuff and make money and move on. However, artists like collaborating. Artists like seeing their work come to life. That like you recording your music is part of the process. You playing that, getting the right violin that's broken and doing that and having that is something that a computer won't recreate the same way. And even if you did, it's your idea of it. But like people crave that type of artistic experience, like being on a movie set. We're saying a movie set is better than the best day off a movie set for me a lot of the time, where it's like if I'm filming, if I'm around these people, if it's like a good set and that energy at all, it feeds that. It's that absolutely, like I really want to do like mocap one day and stuff like that, because I've done VO, I've done a bunch of stuff, horror, whatever, but it'd be so fun, right? And it's like that's the thing that's like, a computer could like create that, but like being part of that process and like the physicality and the emotion of it and still having that creative experience, but seeing it come to life in a way that I can never bring to life as me as a human is so fascinating. And technology years ago, we couldn't do that. And it's, you know, when things become mainstream, I think it's easy to catastrophize. And while I see the green and I deal with a lot of it with, you know, different job stuff where I'm like, yeah, people are definitely using things
For sure.
bad.
And like
I've hope.
another positive thing too about it though is like this is almost like the second internet or the
Yeah.
second social media, okay? We've learned a lot because when we first had the internet, we had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. Like,
Yeah.
no idea. And then social media happened. We had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. Like,
Yeah.
think about how much it has influenced all kinds of things, elections, whatnot, you know, all kinds of stuff,
Yeah.
right? We had no idea what we were getting ourselves into. Now, we learned a lot through that process. Now we're having this second thing where we're like, okay, we should probably put some things in line so that we don't make the same mistakes. You know
Exactly.
what I mean?
Hopefully learn from those mistakes and grow. And yeah.
So, yeah, it's an exciting time.
Yeah, I think the possibilities are definitely something I try to remind myself when things get really seemingly bleak or negative that at the end of this, when all this settles, when this bubble pops, what we're going to have is technology that could be really exciting and make
Yeah.
things more accessible, more affordable, to bring on more artists to do the thing. Like all of that can exist at the same time because it has been. And I'm trying to be hopeful with it, but it makes me hopeful to hear someone in a position that is, you know, theoretically what people pretend like they could throw in a computer and like have generate feeling positive about it, because I feel like it'd be one of the roles that, you know, when people go, oh, I can write a book, I'm like, yeah, okay, that's fine. Or I'm going to get a AI to do voiceover. I'm like, it's not the same. It's different, but it does allow for, you know, way more opportunities by having that technology. Yeah.
And it just like it's going to help people that we don't even think about, you know, like not that we don't think about, but you know, everyone's afraid of this. What is it called? This thing that Elon Musk is doing. It's brain. What is it called?
The Neuralink.
Neuralink.
Yeah.
You know, everyone thinks like this thing is like going to be, you know, dystopian. But when I realized like, oh, actually, they're going to be able to use this to help people walk that can't.
Like paralysis, or maybe at a point dementia and things like that could help.
Yeah, when I realized that, I was like, okay, like, you know, that is something that is desirable. Like,
Well, it's like the cochlear implants, or I'm probably saying that wrong too. The first time I saw videos of that, I didn't realize there were things that existed that could restore hearing for certain types of deafness and things like that. Where I was like emotional watching these videos, where it's like, holy shit, the concept of someone being able to like hear music for the first time and seeing these videos, like that's not technology I would think of existing. But I feel like now, if we were like, oh, it's an AI that helps you hear again, people are like, you know, it's very how we look at it. And again, AI has been around for so long. It's definitely the application of it. But I'm really hopeful for that return to just like creative projects for the sake of creative projects, and seeing how technology assists that. And I think the ultimate thing I look at is, you know, when Barbie and Oppenheimer happened, my thing about that was that seeing people excited to go to the movies again and like getting it, like seeing it packed and people reacting, it made me emotional. It was truly, Mama was like, oh my God, thank God this feeling is still here. And because it's been so bleak. And I feel like the more we crave like going back to live concerts, doing this stuff, and like this being there, I think the trickle down of it, for lack of a better word I can think of right now, is we're going to see ways that like these passion projects can be made, or these big advancements can be made, and companies will realize that it's not, you know, saving money by using this instead. It's that with partnership with creatives, and like how much bigger you can make your thing, and more accessible you can make the thing, and that hope and that excitement, because ultimately creative people are going to want to create.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
We'll never lose that.
Yeah. It's always, it's so much part of the human experience. I do a thing. I do a thing on here to wrap it up. That is, and I hate to play on spot, but it's part of the fun. A time capsule, basically. So if you had 5 games, not necessarily the best games ever made, your favorite games, whatever, but if you would be like, this is like the 5 like games I am putting in here for whatever reason.
Okay.
What would you do? We would tend to go for like best, but whatever that means to you, you know, it doesn't have to be like the Academy Award winner of blah, blah, blah kind of thing, you know?
Yeah. I can definitely say Silent Hill 1.
Love it. You've made a case for it. And you've reminded me how much I love early Silent Hill for sure.
Silent Hill 1 for sure. Life is Strange 1. You ever played that?
I cosplay Max and Rachel. My girlfriend cosplay. I fucking love Life is Strange. It is phenomenal.
That was the set. Remember when I told you about the experience I had with Silent Hill, about how I found it and it just like destroyed me? Like,
yeah.
The only time that ever happened again was with that game.
What did you choose? What did you choose at the end?
I've played it. I've done it a few times. I don't think I got all the endings, but in the end, the first time I played it, I sacrificed myself or whatever that is.
Sacrifice, yeah. You can sacrifice Chloe or sacrifice the Bay, where you destroy the town or you let Chloe go back and die. Yeah.
I think the first time, God, I can't remember what I did.
That's a game with a killer soundtrack, honestly. Yeah.
Dude, you no kidding, dude.
It wrecks me. I hear Spanish Sahara come on and I still get emotional. Obstacles to my core.
The second game is really good too. I don't know if you played that.
Yeah, devastating.
Yeah, that game is amazing. So definitely Silent Hill 1, Life is Strange 1. Probably got to have like AIM XR for my Oculus.
I love it.
Like I just love that game. It's the perfect VR FPS, like multiplayer. Like
when they crack the tech to make me not motion sick, I will try the fuck out, because I've tried so many times. I was so excited for so many VR games, and I'm like, I get so motion sick the older I get, and so I'm waiting for the perfect one.
So definitely that, and then God, I mean, either Inside or Limbo, and probably Metal Gear for sure, just because I like that game. That PS1 game was like, I just liked that game so much. I don't know.
No, I love that. I think those are all absolutely valid choices and very broad spectrum of choices for sure, which is part of the fun of it. No, it's so funny you say Life is Strange, because it's one of the few that I've played so many times that I'm excited to play. And then I sit down and I've played every single path it offers, because I have played it so much to find every single bit it gives me. And I know that now. And every time I'm convinced I have it, I'm like, no, I know every in and out of this game now. But it's so close to my heart. So close to my heart. I love it so much.
That game like gives me so much like melancholy every time I play it.
It does. It's sad. It like just has something. Yeah.
Like, it reminds me of my childhood, like just like the towns that they're in.
There's something nostalgic. There's something very about the whole series of them. Yeah, that just is captured really well. But it is one of those that like I sat down to start playing it and I did not get up. I just kept playing it and sat there.
Me too.
Yeah,
I played that game for freaking 15 hours.
No, same. I was 16 hours the first time. I just did not leave. Did not do it. I was playing on my MacBook. I was like not prepared to sit there and game. And I was like in the worst angle in bed, just going, okay, yeah, I'll start it. And I did not stop playing it.
Yeah. I couldn't believe it. You know, I was like, I couldn't believe how good it was. I was like, I won't keep you, but I'm curious. Have you played Before the Storm?
Yes. I absolutely love it.
Is it worth getting into?
Fantastic. So it's shorter and the ending is a little like okay, but then it like gets you again. Yeah. The atmosphere is fantastic. Daughter did all the music for it, and so it has a very unique, very that feeling still there. But getting to know Rachel that way, absolutely heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking. Like there's no spoilers at all. I just got chills thinking about it. It's literally one throwaway line when you're talking to her at first, and she's just like, one day I'm going to climb Mount Everest. And you just feel like this like stab, just like knowing. And it's so just a passing moment. And that alone, like the emotional narrative of that game is
Mhm.
fantastic. And so I'm very much an original Life Strange Like Ho. My girlfriend's very much like Before the Storm is her comfort game of that point, because one just makes her so sad. And it's absolutely worth playing. That True Colors was also good. That was one of the more recent ones that came out.
That one.
Yeah, True Colors was fine, but it actually has a character from Before the Storm in it that is featured in that as one of the love interests in True Colors. But absolutely Before the Storm is worth playing.
Yeah, and then
Fantastic game.
I would definitely throw in for the last one would definitely be Little Nightmares, either one or two.
They're
But
both great. They're both great.
I'm excited for the third one to come out.
I know, I'm so excited. There's so many games I'm sitting here just like waiting for people. Like we have so many cool games coming out and I love them. I'm excited, but I'm still sitting here like BioShock 4 one day. One day I'll hear you. Little Nightmares 3. Just so many that I just have this absolute like take your time, make it perfect, do what you need to do. But the moment it comes out, it will take over my life. Okay, well, thank you so much, so much for your time and fascinating insights. If you have anything you want to plug or anything like that, please feel free. If people were to find you or a passion project or anything you want to put out there.
I mean, you can find most everything on my website, which is just www.joshuacaro.com. Have mostly all my stuff on there. I have so many, I have 2 Bandcamp pages and all kinds of stuff, but just start there, and if you care, you'll find more stuff.
I love that. Are you going to PAX or GDC or anything?
I'm not. I have a show. I have too many things this week, and I have a show on Saturday, and I'm on a panel on Friday and Saturday this weekend. I'm playing one of my solo electro-acoustic piano pieces at this concert,
that's so
which
sick.
I'm looking forward to. It also requires a guitar amp, so I do all kinds of noisy stuff with it.
I would love to see that one day. Yeah, that's insane.
I would have loved to go to GDC this year, and I feel like I'm missing out because some of my friends are there, but I unfortunately can't go.
Well, if you can make it out to PAX West, I highly recommend it. Highly recommend it. PAX is one of those most magical times for me where it just feels like creatives talking about things they're fucking passionate about, and it is electric. Huge shout out to Josh for coming on DLC Required this week. Big shout out to all the devs who do listen and love this podcast. Mad love to you all. It honestly is so fucking cool to talk about. So goddamn cool to be able to talk about games and just have these new insights and get excited and nerd out. And I love it. Anyway, that's our show. We'll see you next week. We are back, baby. Enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you guys later. Go eat, take your meds, do the good things. Bye.